Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're talking about The Garment Jungle. A film with a terrible title, I think.
I kind of like it, actually.
Garments.
It reads like one of those 1950s pulp detective novels. The Garment Jungle.
Yes, well. It's based not on a pulp novel, but on a Reader's Digest article about the infiltration into the garment district in New York of organised crime. So the film is about a small-ish company, not one of the giants, that's run by Lee J. Cobb, and how he has been using the mob to bust unions, and how that kind of gets on top of him. His son comes back from the Korean War and is new to all of the developments that have been going on. He's just kind of your way into the movie, I guess, and the catalyst for change. I mean, I found it quite a surprisingly interesting drama about labour and that kind of thing.
I mean, to have an American film just immediately after the House of Un-American Activities, but still, it's in the 50s, so there's still all that communist hysteria. To be pro-union is really quite something.
This is 1957 this came out. And there's a whole thing in the production of the film we were just reading about, where the original director, Robert Aldrich, wanted the film to be grittier and really more pro-union than it was, although I think it quite clearly... I think it is.
It sides with the union.
It does, yeah.
Well, the thing about this film is that it sides with the union, but it has this effect of making the union's interests concomitant with those of business. Yeah, so the interests of business and the unions are one and the same, right? Which is very different from life. Yeah, so it reconciles that contradiction. And it lays the blame on the mafia rather than on, business wanting to exploit the workers as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So after a few weeks of filming, Aldrich was fired and replaced with Vincent Sherman, who we were just talking about some of his greatest hits, and none of them really appear to be all that great. He was a working director.
I read his biography, Vincent Sherman. He directed Mrs. Skeffington, the Betty Davis film, and went on to, a career at Warner Brothers as a second-rate director of A films initially, yeah. So he was directing big stars like Joan Crawford in big-budget films, but, he wasn't anybody's first call to direct them. Michael Curtiz was the top director at Warner's in this period. And then, if they needed somebody to cope with very difficult women, Vincent Sherman was called upon because he wasn't above sleeping, with Betty Davis or Joan Crawford to calm their nerves.
We should all be so lucky.
Which always made the film run smoother.
Well, as indistinguished as his film career may ultimately be,
it's not that interesting.
I found the direction of this, although I suppose it's difficult to tell when a film's been partially reshot, who's responsible for what. I found the direction of this reasonably elegant, actually. I don't think the direction of the acting is all that great, and I think they don't have a great script to work with.
I was just going to say, so that's very interesting because the shots, like the composition of the shots, the angles, the fluidity of the camera, there's on-location shooting and the matching of the studio with the on-location, that's all terrific, right? But there's something disjunctive, which is, he's got fantastic performers, and the film is full of awkward pauses, of false reactions, of, moments that are just very badly directed in terms of actors, and that you cannot blame the actors for, because some of the actors are really amongst America's greatest actors, like Lee J. Cobb, So there's like a kind of, there's a cinematic nous involved in the filmmaking, but there's also a heavy-handedness or a lack of fluidity, flexibility.
Which is more in the storytelling, or more in like I say, in the dialogue. I do think it's a very bad script, especially early on. Some of the writing is really plain and obvious, and people stating very obvious things and that kind of thing. It does not hold much promise, I guess.
It's hard to blame the writing in a way because the film was originally meant to be one thing, and then it was taken over by another director, and contorted to say something else.
Yeah.
Right. So,
I mean,
so that's why the writing.
I don't mean to blame like any one in particular, I guess, but it's just a problem with the film. This is the effect that's had.
And that's a good way of looking at the film, I think.
But actually, when it gets into the kind of triangle, I suppose, between the son, the union organiser, and his wife, I found that stuff really engrossing and really interesting. And the union organiser in particular...
Robert Loggia is the actor's name.
Tullio, played by Robert Loggia. I thought he was wonderful. I think he was the best thing in the film. I thought his character was pretty complex. And I understood the competing desires and interests in him. He's got this wife and this baby that he wants to look after, but he also wants to keep on doing the right thing and fighting for workers, and he really believes in the union and this kind of thing. And then when his life's clearly on the line, as it's obvious, and people have been killed by these gangsters, right at the start, Lee Jacobs' business partner, who is pro-union, has been killed. I suppose you could say it's stupidity and it's impractical. Like, he knows he's putting his life on the line and he shouldn't be because he's got other things to worry about. But he wants to do the right thing and he fights for what's right and he really feels that in his bones. So when he is killed by those gangsters and, 400,000 people come out for his funeral, you kind of believe it, right?
Actually, that looks like archival footage of something.
Oh, yeah, the actual footage has to... I don't know what that's from, but...
Yeah, it's amazing. I was thinking, or my questions about this film is, why would anyone who's not a scholar, or who's got some scholarly interest in areas that the film touches on, why would anyone want to watch this film? Because in some ways, it's kind of, it's very pulpy. It's only 88 minutes, but I found it slow. So why put it out in this magnificent box set? Done by Columbia. So it's Columbia Noir 1, the box set that the film comes from. And the film actually looks magnificent. It's a fantastic copy. They've done a fantastic job, Indicator. But what would you say are the reasons to watch this film? Are there any reasons to watch this film if you're not like a scholar?
Well, yeah, that's the question, like beyond academic interest. Because at the start it struck me as... like, we're watching this on a Sunday afternoon, and it really struck me as something you would find on TV on a Sunday afternoon. Do you know what I mean? Something that's kind of cheaply bought by a TV studio to put on. And sometimes those films surprise you. You find something in there that you didn't expect. And this kind of has that, right?
I mean, I think for me, there are several things. So first of all, the beginning of the film is fantastic. Lee J. Cobb is saying there, I will never let a union in my shop or whatever. And, his partner goes, well, I'm a designer and I'm getting the union in. And, it goes down the lift and boom, he's killed, right? The lift goes down. Yeah. It's an amazing opening sequence, right? It's like really pulpy, it's action filled, you know exactly where you are. Yeah, it's exciting, So I thought that was like almost a demonstration of pulp. Yeah, because, there's no complexity or sophistication of ideas. There's no nuanced setting of grounds for later. It's just bang, you're right in and, you're right in like death and strikes and murder, right? It's fantastic. The other thing that I loved very much was that it's a film about the garment industry, right? And so it touches on fashion, and the film tells you, right, all these gowns are by Jean-Louis, right? And they are very beautiful, and so you have like that conflict between appearances, and sweat, right? And actually that is designed into the film itself, right? Where you have like the fancy office, the showroom where the clothes are shown, and then you open this barred door and, you're right in the sweatshop, right? With like hundreds of people kind of, sweating away. So I thought that, that's kind of, that could have been developed into a really interesting theme, the distinctions between the front of the house, the back of the house, the facade and the real underneath, but and I think it's there somewhere, but it's not kind of consistently laid out. But that's, to me, a kind of a really interesting thing. And the other reason to watch the film is because I think it powerfully evokes a documentary flavor of a way of life and a way of work. I mean, you get a real sense of the garment industry, of the neighborhoods, where it took place, of,
there's a lot of location shooting.
A lot of location shooting, which almost can't help but make you wonder my God, those posters, the way that the shop windows are, there's a whole huge fancy kind of shop that wraps around a huge building that just sells cigars. Who knew that cigars were so popular at one point? Yeah, so that flavor for the way things were, a way of life that no longer exists. The type of people who work there and where they lived. That's all very powerfully evoked in the film, I think.
Yeah, I think the location shooting really, really helps the film, because there's so often you see a film where it's been shot on sound stages and you feel the fakeness and you feel the kind of inauthenticity, and here you'd feel that sense a lot less. You actually feel it. These are the streets of New York where these actions are happening, these conversations are happening.
I mean, obviously most of it must have been filmed in the studio, but it's really well matched with those, with that documentary footage.
Yeah, well, I was reading that. Well, obviously the stuff on streets you can tell has been shot on streets, and I was reading that the kind of shop floor was a real shop floor that they bought and kitted out themselves, but it was a real space. So, maybe more real than you even thought.
Yeah, you can tell in a way. Yeah. But there are things that really don't work. So here are some of the best actors in America of that period, and here are some of the worst, right? So you have Lee J. Cobb and his son, and the son is terrible.
He's the worst thing about the film.
Who is he? What's his name, by the way?
Yeah, so Kerwin Matthews. Do you know the name?
No, I didn't until now.
Kerwin Matthews. That's his Wikipedia profile picture.
That shirt.
Looking very fabulous. That says Jack the Giant Killer. So he's best known, according to Wikipedia, for playing the titular heroes in The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, The Three Worlds of Gulliver, and Jack the Giant Killer. He was gay.
No.
His partner was Tom Nichol from 1961 until Kerwin's death in 2007.
All of a sudden he's more interesting.
Of course he is. But I mean, I didn't know him, and I thought he was terrible in this, and I could see why I'd never heard of him before on the basis of this, because he handles his dialogue very, very badly. I don't think he does an interesting thing with his facial gesture, his performance. He really kills scenes stone dead. Lee J. Cobb is a wonderful actor and a wonderful presence, and I love him. I don't think he's given enough interesting to do. I think he does the best. He makes what he can interesting. But I don't think the character
is not an interesting one.
Exactly, the character is not rich enough.
I
think the most interesting ones for me, the most interesting characters and actors were the union busting couple. Yeah,
it's a pity that the film wasn't about them, actually.
Although I do like it, kind of is for a bit. I mean, I do like there's a shifting focus, I guess. At the start, I really thought it's all about Lee J. Cobb's character. He introduces the film. It's all about him.
He's the star.
And then the son comes in and he hears this rumour about his dad, or this the union guy says, "Oh, your dad had his partner killed." And so the son then has to take this up with the union guy, and then it becomes about their relationship for a while. And Lee J. Cobb is not in it for a long stretch.
Well, the film is very disjointed, because I think you can detect that there's an intention to make a parallel between Lee J. Cobb and his son and Robert Loggia and his father. There's a clear attempt made to connect them, right? Robert Loggia is only involved in the union, etc., because his father was a tailor, and I don't quite know why, really. But they attempt to give you an explanation, but that doesn't quite work. But they do tell you that's why he could never do anything else, and you think, well, what? So there is meant to be a parallelism between them. But it's just not well worked through.
But in terms of the kind of, like I say, the shifting focus, I think it's going to be about this one character, and then it's not for a while, and actually it's not the smoothest thing, but actually it kind of made sense. Like the focus goes from this character to this character to this character, and so although Lee J. Cobb is name on poster or whatever, he's the star. I suppose the disappointment, if anything, is that he's not in it very much, because there is so much focus on these other characters. But the benefit of that is that the other stories are probably a bit more interesting.
I mean, I don't know. The film is full of so many interesting things that don't work out. So, for example, I love the way that Robert Loggia is killed. That he's killed, that he's held down by his own colleagues, by his own union members, right? That could have been made much more potent. It could have been made much more symbolic, right? It's like a Judas moment, right? It's not really played through. The fact that he's got a witness, that his witness is also a friend of his, but he's so afraid of his life that he runs off, leaving him to die on his own. You know, when he goes to confess to the wife, that's very badly handled. You know, I think he should have been given much more sympathy. I mean, who wouldn't run away in a way? Yeah, you've got a wife and your own child, and someone's been killed in front of you. I mean, I think the first impetus is to run away. So I thought that the whole scene was played terrible, as if he'd committed as if he'd been the one who stabbed the husband, right? So I think that should have been played differently. I'm not saying that what he did was right, to run off and leave his friend to die, but certainly it's understandable. And also, you don't see him watching his friend die. You know, you just see him running away, right? So I
didn't feel that in that scene, I must say. I felt like, because he's going to the wife and he's apologising, and, you know, because he, as inadvertently or not, you know, his inaction did contribute to the death. And he's terribly sorry, and he wants to kind of try and apologise. And I don't think, you know, it's certainly understandable that the wife is distraught and attacks him. And it's also understandable that he feels as terrible as he does. I wouldn't expect him to come in and say, well, it was awful, but I had this reasoning.
Let's distinguish.
And I don't think it's the film that is treating him badly either.
Well, you see, I do. I think, so let's distinguish between what he's feeling, what the wife is feeling, and how the film is showing, right? And I can completely understand his own feelings of culpability. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe if he'd done something, he could have saved them. We don't know that, right? But he didn't put the knife in. He didn't kill him.
No.
Yeah, he just didn't save them, which is different. The wife running off the rails like that, I don't quite get. I mean, I can understand her being distraught, but blaming him for the murder of her husband is just completely wrong, you know, in my view. And the film treating it as if it is kind of concomitant, as if it is the same thing, is a stupid, ideological American conception of heroism in a kind of a Cold War climb.
Yeah, that's the thing. It didn't come across me that the film was expressing a point of view on that. How do you feel it did that?
It's asking us to judge the guy and find him wanting, to blame him for the murder, which I think is wrong.
I didn't think that.
Oh.
I didn't think the film was asking me to make a judgment. And I suppose if it was asking me to make a judgment, the judgment that I made was, I understand all the people in this scene and they're in a lot of pain.
You're so much more wiser than I am.
You know what I mean?
Like, no, it's your fault.
So I think you're right. It's a scene of very high drama, you know,
of excessive drama.
Yeah. So maybe that's, I guess, maybe what's pushing you in the direction of saying, well, the film wants you to feel the height of. But the thing is that the high drama for me, the heightened drama, to me, is an expression of the character's pain, as opposed to an expression of any kind of moral judgment that the film.
Well, you see, but the whole scene is about moral judgment. It's about culpability and forgiveness and confession. That's what it's about. He goes there to confess. You know, says I'm guilty. The wife says you kill her. Yeah. So actually, these things have to be resolved in the scene, and they're not very well.
Yeah, maybe. It's about the people, though, not God's judgment. You know. I didn't have a problem with that scene, I must say.
And yet, you know, you couldn't wait for it to finish. So, kind of.
No, that's not quite true. Because you'll notice for a while, I really shut up in the film. You know. You know, so I made a few comments, you know, at the start about, this is a bit stiff and what have you, and I think you agreed.
No, I did.
But then I shut up for a while because it got really interesting. And then when I said how long left is there, it's when we both, you know, sort of when Lee J. Cobb sort of is realising everything he's done wrong, and the son is there with the girl, and it's like, we're going to have dinner together, and it's obviously just before the dad then dies, which is like, really yes,
cliched. Yeah.
You know, and that's when we went, ugh. And that's when I said, okay, let's just check how long there is left. Because actually, I thought that might be the end. I thought, God, this could be a really terrible, sickening, schmaltzy,
and then,
you know, which it wasn't. There was 20 minutes after that.
Yeah.
But, you know, a reasonable 20 minutes, although, again, it does end so he goes to jail, and they manage to put the mobster away because he's clearly the baddie, and they've got the books, which apparently, well, it did make me think, because this gangster will kill who he likes and all the rest, and then all of a sudden we've got the books on how much my dad paid you, and that's going to send you down, and you think, really, is it? But then I did also think,
isn't it going to send you down as well?
Well, I thought that, but then I also thought Al Capone, they got him on tax evasion.
Yeah.
So maybe the books would make some difference.
No, I mean, the books didn't. I mean, the questions that the books raised for me was, isn't that going to take you down? Aren't they going to find your business? Because it's your father, but it's just your father's business. So are you going to be left with the business at the end of this all, right?
Because the books just say this guy's been in league with these gangsters.
Yeah.
Because the son says, because the books show extortion. It's like, well, I mean, it's only extortion up to a point. Like, the dad chose to pay the guy. Like, the books don't show that he was forced to.
Yeah.
Anyway, but then just after that, they get the guy, and the books prove that he's guilty and what have you. And you see on the newspaper, mobster goes to jail for 5,000 years. And then there's this scene of, like, he's going out with the two girls, but he can't because it's a business, and the life of a businessman.
That's such a terrible ending. But I also think that, if an hour into the film someone is asking when does it end, that's not a compliment.
No, probably not.
Especially when the film is only 88 minutes long.
Yeah.
So a mixed bag.
Very mixed bag, but an interesting film, and I'm surprisingly glad that I watched it. I didn't expect to be.
Hurrah, because we have a box set to get through.
But I do want to reiterate that the thing I'm really most surprised by about the film is how appealing it was to look at. But I don't just mean the restoration. When I mean the direction, I mean the choice of shots, the way the camera moves, the way it frames things. Much more interesting than I was prepared to expect.
Yes, I was not as surprised by that just because of the people involved, actually. But I can't state enough what a joy it is to watch these restorations. It is like watching these films anew. I now often have friends saying, well, have you seen so-and-so? No, it's on YouTube. Well, I'm not watching shit on YouTube if it's like in blurro vision like that. It's like such a completely different experience of seeing. In this one, they had the trailer, and you compare the visual quality of the trailer to the restored Blu-ray that you're watching, and it is just miles apart, really. There is a kind of a sensuous pleasure in watching a good print. And these are beautiful. Yeah,
it was really, really beautiful.
So we recommend.
Yeah, just about. It's interesting. It's an interesting movie.
All right. So thank you very much for listening. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.